This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Carl Tatz Design, Jay-Z Microphones, Spectra 1964, and iZotope. You're hearing my voice right now through the Jay-Z pop filter on the Jay-Z BB29 microphone in a Carl Tatz designed room through the Spectra 1964 STX 600 mic pre-complimenter and iZotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC Mercury Extreme Pro 6G SSD. So get ready to rock.
I love using vocal synth on drums. I like using vocal synth to make weird percussion parts. So I don't really understand, which is what I love about it, but it kind of does like vocodey stuff and vocal resynthesis. I guess they have all these different modes that are very, very clever. So it kind of combines the characteristics of two sounds, and it's perfect for like having a vocal line and playing a chord.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. No matter where you like to rock in the galaxy, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron lets you record with confidence over USB-C with up to more than a gigabyte per second of real-world performance. Transfer tracks in seconds and take your sessions with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crushproof. Find the Envoy Pro Electron and all your OWC storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. I used to have an expensive pop filter for my vocal mic that was so fragile, I had to put a sign on it warning singers not to touch it or else the thing would break. But not anymore. Now I've got this super durable pop filter from jzmic.com that sounds fantastic. I don't have to worry about stuff breaking and can focus on making music. Go ahead, grab my pop filter. I dare you. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS and get 20% off the amazing pop filter at jzmic.com. Howdy, Rockstar. Are you ready to discover the secrets to making your mixes sound professional no matter what your studio situation? Then check out my free mixing course, mixmasterbundle.com, where I show you how to get pro-sounding mixes in your DAW using simple techniques and free plugins. And when you're ready for more advanced studio skills, then check out Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can learn from Grammy-winning teachers to help you record, edit, mix, and master your best record ever. Use the code ROCKSTAR for 10% off for a limited time. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Damian Taylor, a 6-time Grammy-nominated record producer, music mixer, and programmer, songwriter, song doctor, sonic architect, and explorer, best known for his work with Bjork in the studio and on the stage, the Prodigy, the Killers, Arcade Fire, UNKLE, Trust, Odette, the Temper Trap, City of the Sun, and Dizzy, to name just a few. Damian describes his love for music and creating music and art as the intersection of ideas and expression, performance and design, juxtaposing not only organic and synthetic methods of creation and manipulation, but also cultural and stylistic concepts and perspectives. He's also the founder of the Complete Producer Network, an active hub for people all over the world who are dedicated to improving their ability to create and share extraordinary music. It's an open, inclusive, and supportive community of music creators who come together to share ideas, insights, tips, tricks, strategies, and perspectives to drive themselves and others forward. Sounds a lot like what we do here at Recording Studio Rockstars. Damian also live streams over on Twitch regularly now, sharing his studio experience, and is active on social media, writing essays on Twitter and, creating an Instagram channel too, as well as a YouTube channel, which we've included a link to. Thanks so much to Colin Ramsey at GPS Management for making our introduction. Please welcome Damian Taylor to Recording Studio Rockstars. Damian, are you ready to rock, my friend?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be, so let's do it.
Dude, it's great to meet you. It's great to have you here on the show. You've done some really cool stuff. I have to be honest, when I saw Bjork listed in there, I got a little excited about doing this and meeting you, you know?
Nice. Well, when I first knew I was going to go in the studio with her, I kind of lost my mind for about 48 hours. So yeah, she's a good one.
Technically, I think you lost your mind for about 6 years, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever found it again, to be
honest. Well, give us a little bit of an introduction in your own words to who you are. I mean, give us the brief arc from how you got interested in music to landing in Los Angeles, where you are now.
Well, I mean, the simple, I'll try to do the abridged version. My parents had me listening to Wagner in the womb. My parents are like big classical music people. And when I was a tiny kid, I was always one of the people who liked to collect the cardboard boxes that the toys came in and build things out of the boxes rather than play with the toys. Then, I played kind of classical music and more formal stuff when I was really young. And when I was about 14, I decided that all sucked. And when I was 15, I started playing in bands and soon after found out what a 4-track was. So sold my mountain bike, started recording in my bedroom. I was blessed to be a teenager when grunge happened. So it was a really kind of wonderful environment to throw all of my angst into. And then not long after that, like drum and bass and Warp Records and stuff started happening in the UK. I'd been very influenced as well by like the golden era of hip hop and sampling. When I was 11, my favorite record was Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet.
Oh, yeah.
So the combination of kind of guitar feedback, samplers, and weird synthetic stuff combined with human expression always fascinated me. And I figured out, thank goodness, after recording on 4-track on my own in my bedroom for a couple of years, that I wasn't a singer. And I really enjoyed the process of actually making records a lot more. So then that's really what kicked off my journey. I started in Auckland in New Zealand, where I was living at the time, then moved to London when I was 19 and just basically banged on every door until someone would let me in the room.
That's cool. So what was we're talking about the 90s in London?
Yeah, I moved there like 97, basically, when I was 19. And luckily, I mean, I worked in a pizza restaurant for a couple of months and then landed a job in a guy's studio in Brixton in South London.
I thought it was all shawarma.
Oh, sure. What's that?
I thought it was all about shawarma in London. That's what what I remember, right?
They call it kebab, mate.
Kebab. Yeah, right.
I think you used the appropriate term there. So basically I worked in a studio in a guy's living room for a year, but it was amazing because he hired me like as an assistant, but 3 hours into the first session, he just shrugged and walked out. And basically it wound up being almost one of those old school in-house engineering roles that you talk about where just anything comes through the door and you engineer it. There's a studio called Wolf Studios that was advertised in the back of Sound on Sound magazine for like £25 an hour. So one day you'd have like the local gospel group, then you'd have like an Eritrean singer coming with his producer and like a QY20 sequencer, then a kind of a rare groove band, then a drum and bass duo. And it was really interesting, but I kind of started to freak out that I wasn't meeting anyone in like the top levels of London studios. Like my dream when I moved to London was either to be an assistant at Strong Room or Abbey Road. But luckily, the one external session that came in had an engineer on it called Michael Aid. It was for a band called JBK, who are the members of Japan without David Sylvian. And I did a bunch of Pro Tools editing on that one because I'd got a little bit obsessed with Pro Tools in my spare time. And Michael wound up bumping into a producer from another project at a gig. Producer was a guy called Guy Sigsworth, who was looking for somewhere cheap to do Pro Tools with someone who was good. And Michael said, you should go to this little studio in Brixton and work with this kid, Damian. So I was still 20 at the time. Guy came in, we did a 3-day session. And at the end, I said like, hey, Guy, I've been trying to figure out how to go freelance. Do you have any advice? And he went, oh, well, I've got a project coming up. And why don't you come and work with me? And, a couple of months later, we were working on Bjork together. So it was a really
amazing.
Kind of crazy journey. Yeah. Right place, right time, I guess.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I was certainly a fan of Bjork at that point. Homogenic and stuff,
Oh my God, Homogenic, yeah.
That's probably right. 97 was right around the time when I would have been listening to that, I think, right? Isn't that about when it came out?
That came out like a couple of weeks after I arrived in London as well. So she'd always been on my radar, but I'd never listened to her intensely. But Homogenic came out and I was just like, this is the most extraordinary thing I've ever heard. And I was like playing it on repeat. And they always talk about like sometimes you like manifest your own reality. But that that record and my obsession with it may have opened a kind of a portal in time and space.
Yes, I have to credit my girlfriend at the time for turning me on to
Right.
that record.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a unique record, and I don't think anyone's ever made anything like it. You can hear people trying to make it for a while and not really hitting it, but yeah.
Well, you guys have done some really great stuff. I mean, maybe talk a little bit about that, the process of composing and write. I don't know exactly what your role was initially stepping in with Bjork. I'm guessing maybe the first thing was like, come do Pro Tools for us or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you expanded. But it sounds like you were, when I listen to your records, I hear this like almost like glitch editing, where things are cutting in and out. And I feel like I saw you talk somewhere about approaching editing and music where you were doing everything manually in the computer instead of using MIDI like everybody else was.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of, that little brief mention of like golden era sampling and the Bomb Squad and stuff. But basically, Guy Sigsworth, who is this producer I met in Brixton, he had been in Bjork's band for her first 2 albums. So he's her musical director. He co-wrote a song called Unravel with her and produced that on Homogenic. But he actually, he met Seal at a rave in London, and they became friends, and he started doing Seal's demos in his bedroom in London, and then basically his demos got signed by Trevor Horn to ZTT, which is a roundabout way of saying like I worked nonstop with Guy for 2 years, and in that process we also did Bjork. So Guy had been doing stuff where he was programming with MIDI and an Atari and an Akai sampler, and he had these concepts that were influenced by his work with Trevor, by stuff like Scritty Polity, like hyper tight, kind of like oscilloscope level tightness work, and then also like a lot of Bjork's concepts around Vespertine. She was listening a lot to like a German group called Oval, whose main instrument was scratched CDs. They'd like burn sounds onto CDs and then scratch them, and then it would go gong, 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 gong. So there's this kind of thing floating around in the air of like, oh my God, now with like, especially what you could do with Pro Tools, we really like jumped the gun on using it very creatively. So it's not just like you can put a sound in there or you can record, but you can shred a sound into like a million parts and stick it back together. And the fact that you could edit in so much more detail than you could on a sampler, where remember, for kids who don't know at that point, like, a sampler, you'd have like 2 rows of kind of 32 characters on a little screen, and you'd be using a big scroll wheel going back and forth. So to suddenly be able to like see a waveform, really dive in there and pull it apart was hugely influential.
Yeah, the Akai S1000 and all that was the one I started on.
Yeah.
Maybe,
like what a pain in the ass it was just to like edit a kick drum, right?
Yeah, well, you had to manually go through and like find the zero crossing on loops and things like that. All these pain in the butt things. But hearing you talk about scratching CDs and then creating these edits in the spaces, a reminder to me is like, how do you balance that difference between things that you stumble on accidentally, which become brilliant, versus trying too hard to make something sound like that, and then you're like, God, it just sucks,
Oh God, I mean, it's the same. I think no matter what you do, whether you're like playing an instrument in real time or editing, there in many ways. I think when I started working really intensely with Guy, there was this period of 2 weeks where I noticed my brain was translating between being able to deal with tiny details and then suddenly understanding the impact that would have on the entire piece of music. One of the things I did actually really love, and I think we got one of the first Pro Tools Mix Plus systems in the UK. And again, quick bit of music history for people. The Pro Tools Mix Plus was the first thing where you could run like 64 channels of audio and just enough DSP to actually mix a record. So that came out in like 1998, I think.
Yeah.
Many years before In the Box was a term.
Yeah, but ironically, we didn't have to worry about latency back then because everything was designed to be able to record through it, right? Through the interfaces.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I've always used the TDM systems or whatever for that reason. But I think what I was trying to get to was like, I loved being able to edit little things while having larger loops of music happening. So you could always like really hear stuff in the flow. And that's a philosophy that I still use to this day. And, I like doing a lot of stuff when I'm programming or building stuff electronically, where sometimes you're looping up 2 bars, and without stopping, you're looping up 16 bars and switching that to 32, then pulling it back in. So I kind of try to create things so that the sonic environment that you're listening in is always changing. And I think that helps your brain keep stuff fresh.
With so many game-changing iZotope plugins to choose from, deciding which one to buy next could be a bit of a challenge. But did you know that now you can have all their plugins through iZotope's new affordable subscription bundle, Music Production Suite Pro, for only $19.99 per month? Get your Rockstar extended 30-day free trial subscription now at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Do you need to record direct stereo keyboards? Spectra 1964 now offers the Stereo BBDI-2 with custom-wound high-Z transformers for big headroom, virtually flat response, and a 15 dB input pad. The Spectra 1964 BBDI passive direct box is also perfect for recording deep bass that will make your mixes sound huge. Plug that into a C610 comp limiter, and as founder Bill Cheney points out, it'll move your pant leg. Get your sound moving at Spectra1964.com. So when I was getting ready for this interview, I was trying to remember a movie I had watched a little while ago, which may be too outside of, the time frame that you were there in London. But it was a 24-hour Party People.
Right.
Did you watch that one about the whole birth of the Manchester scene and Joy Division and everything?
That one? Yes, I have seen that one. Yeah.
Really great. Really fun to just see that and realize that was kind of the birth of the rave scene in Manchester, which maybe sort of was, the beginning of that era.
Yeah, like 88, 89, it all changed over there.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there. Fun one to watch.
Yeah. Well, I do have to say, like, for people who haven't been in, like, the British Isles, like, I'm originally Canadian and my parents are British. Then I lived in New Zealand when I was a teenager, and now I'm living in the States. There's this very different kind of energy because people are all, like, squashed together so much. And you have, like, this really interesting kind of cultural collision even within cities. I mean, I'm sure it's the same in bigger cities in the States or whatever, but it's just, I think the fact that the history goes back so far. And what I'm trying to say is there's this bizarre energy on the streets that's really, really interesting, and kind of people are always like ready for some kind of a release. It's why, like, I think, the way that the British watch soccer.
Yeah, a little intense, right?
And then they kind of bring that into a club. And that was what was kind of amazing, actually, going to see, DJs and stuff over there. When I moved over, like, the first thing I went to do was Groove Rider at the Blue Note, because drum and bass was just blowing up. And that was just like seeing the way people responded to music in the UK was like a sports match. It was like, the whole time. No one was like being cool. And it was like, so that kind of like almost like wild energy in the otherwise like, button down culture was pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a little bit of competitive spirit is good for music. I mean, you think about like, the birth of hip hop and rap and breakdancing and stuff like that out of Brooklyn and New York.
Yeah.
So I can see that same sort of thing in the club scene and the DJs. Even being a fan of Mike Skinner in the Streets later on, I felt like everything I read about it was all about the competition involved in that scene.
Right. Yeah. I always think about it's a bit like, it's that kind of like victory thing. Like if your team is winning and the crowd's just going crazy. And, I remember working with bands where the guys just going like, I just miss going to a football match and just screaming.
Yeah.
So that kind of like wild, unhinged thing that you get. And also like the communal energy, I think, as well in crowds was pretty wild.
Well, we have that spirit here in the U.S. and it's also called football.
Right. Well said. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about working with Bjork. Was there sort of a routine to the studio? Was there a routine to the composition of the music? I remember reading stories about her, probably in that homogenic phase of like going off and starting a song in the shower and then singing it on a walk and then bringing it into the studio, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's worth just saying out front that, like, while I'm a record producer and Bjork is often quoted, like Bjork is her own producer. And so my role with her, I called it kind of like as her sonic butler.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I think her management team called it like central programmer. So I was like her programmer and engineer and basically like her sidekick, kind of the Robin to her Batman.
Yeah.
So whichever situation she would go and I'd work with her like through a whole record. But basically the most interesting thing working with her is that she is kind of always having an adventure. So she never wants to do the same thing twice. She never wants to repeat the routine. All of the stuff I learned, when I wound up spending a ton of time in like the best studios in London, she didn't care about. She wouldn't want to do like a sound check or anything like that. It's just like turn up, go for it. She's entirely led by her instinct, but also she's like an incredible conceptual thinker and an incredible conceptual communicator. So she seemed to have the understanding about how to work in a way where your higher concepts are far more important. And it's almost like your studio time are like these brief moments where you kind of like dip into a context where they can turn into something tangible. But in general, she tends to work very short days, takes a lot of time to think about stuff. And yeah, exactly what you're saying, like her whole walking and singing and with a dictaphone and was kind of wild. But almost every possible way you could imagine a track being made, like she's done. So the first record I did with her top to bottom was Volta. I worked on the early stages of Vespertine after Homogenic. But on Volta, sometimes she'd literally turn up in the studio one morning and say like, "Oh, I had a dream and here's the part." And then she'd just like play it on a keyboard and then sing the song. Like just, know exactly how it went. Some songs she would kind of just be improvising with a bunch of noisemakers and then spend, God knows how long editing it into some kind of shape. Other songs she'd sit down with Sibelius and literally write out a score and compose it, on a staff.
I didn't know that was a thing she did.
Oh no, she's incredibly musically talented, and she did, the whole classical music thing when she was young as well. The walking thing is huge. I don't know if you heard the story, but basically she would always just talk about walking to school as a kid in Iceland on her own and just singing into the wind, basically, and walking along by the sea. So that's really built into her as like her relationship with music being kind of like a force of nature or a complement to nature. And then sometimes, like Mark Bell from LFO, rest in peace, would just like bring in a backing track and she'd just go, "That's cool," and just sing over it. And that was, so really every way you could imagine. Oh, then of course, she'd have like charts made and then go in and perform live with like an orchestra or a brass group or something like that and do proper old school live off the floor kind of stuff.
Yeah, and she started out with the Sugar Cubes was the early band.
Sugar Cubes, I think, was like her 5th or 6th or 7th band. So yeah, which is kind of nuts. She was in quite a lot of bands before that. Interestingly, the label that she's with, One Little Indian, Derek Burkett runs that label. He was he had a punk band called Flock of Pink Indians, and he built his whole label totally independently. But he used to put out, I think he went to Iceland like in the early 80s, and Bjork was in a punk band at the time when she was like 15. So he put out 7 Inches from her punk band. And then I think she had another band after that. Then she was in some kind of crazy jazz group called Glinglow for a second, might have been just like a one-off. She had an album out when she was 11. So she was kind of like a child prodigy in Iceland as well. And then Sugar Cubes, and then her Bjork debut, like her debut solo record, came out when she was 26. So I think that's a good like 10 or 11 albums into her career by that point.
Well, it's really fun when you get a chance to work with somebody that is just, flowing with creativity and open and always, when you work with people that really welcome you in the studio as a collaborator, I always find that's really fun to do.
Yeah, definitely. And that was, another joy working with her was she would really pull in all these different people. So I'd get to meet like incredible different people as a result of working with her, from like kind of the underground bass producers from London, or, we did sessions with Timbaland, or, she'd just go, "Oh, we're going to Jamaica for a week," and she'd fly people in. And, so it was kind of amazing, just a total adventure really. And just to clarify, like I worked on the early stages of Vespertine, and then there's like a break of about 5 or 6 years before I got called back in for Volta. And then that was like a 6-year kind of two project with a world tour in between, a big flow. But I really like built my career working 18 hours a day in small windowless rooms in London.
Right.
So to go from that, you're in an air conditioned room with like 2 dudes, and then you go and work with Bjork, and it's just like you're flying around the world, and you're in a house in Puerto Rico on the beach for like 7 months or something like that, or we're off to San Francisco this time, and then playing in her band, we got to go all over the world. So it was really an incredible gift to work with her.
Don't forget to stay edgy, by the way.
Right.
One of the records you did, Frosty, or songs rather, had these great organs and celestes and stuff like that in some of those compositions. I was curious whether you guys would, lean on samples a lot for some of those sounds, or would you record things and recreate your own samples to play instruments back? How would you do so? Obviously, if you're moving really quickly, you probably just grabbed whatever was there and started making music.
Yeah. Frosty's off Vespertine, is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So we did a kind of similar thing actually on Biophilia as well, but the simple answer is she would very often be like working with a very simple setup, so like a computer and a pair of speakers, more when she's writing and doing conceptual stuff. And so in that case, we might do mock-ups. But then on Vespertine, after I was involved in Vespertine, she went through this whole process for like, a good year or two where she brought in, incredible arrangers and assembled choirs. And so then she kind of took those structures and those core musical ideas and really just like embellished on them. In Biophilia, there's a whole bunch of pipe organs on that record, and we recorded most of those original songs like in Puerto Rico or some of them in New York, or mostly when we were traveling using these Max MSP systems I designed for her, so she could perform them. But we always knew that we could take that MIDI and robotically trigger pipe organs. So we did a couple of different sessions up in Iceland where, she just found like, where are the local churches with pipe organs, and can we book your church for an afternoon? And then we'd go in with a really simple like remote setup, basically. Just hit up like the local pro audio hire and, got a few extra microphones. And you can get this bar that sits on a pipe organ, and it has solenoids that trigger the keys.
Oh man!
So we'd run the MIDI into the pipe organ, and then she would just play the console like you would like a kind of a synth or something like that. So kind of just be jamming on, like pulling all the stops in and out as the song would progress.
You're making my day, dude. You're making my day.
So yeah, with Biophilia, the kind of is interesting on Biophilia, and having worked with her on Vespertine, and then Volta, and then Biophilia, because Vespertine was like all about the most intricate level of programming detail you could imagine. So when I was programming on that, like we were literally just like drawing individual oscillations and clicks and waveforms with a pencil into like empty channels. So it was wow. You can control the speakers however you want. And her kind of conceptual thing was it's all going to be like tiny icicles of frozen sound, so everything kind of being shattered into shards and everything. Whereas on Volta, she was like, it has to be just like really raw, really basic, really simple, kind of primal. And then on Biophilia, her overall concept for the record was patterns in music and how they relate to patterns in nature. But when we were talking through the whole concept of how do we actually realize this, one of the things we got into was the concept of the spirit of electronic music in terms of the way that sequencers work. So electronic underpinnings, but all triggering acoustic events. So we did have a concept at one point that we'd have robotic instruments built for the entire project and then record the whole album live in one take.
Like a giant, like Calliopes.
Kind of thing, yeah. So there's like robotic gamelans and stuff on the record as well, and we weren't able to assemble everything in one place, but people may have seen the tour she did for that record or the DVD of the live set where she got like a Tesla coil built and had these massive kind of pendulum harps. So
that's awesome.
It's kind of an interesting thing trying to get like these very simple acoustic events, but that are all robotically triggered and in a way played unlike how humans would play them.
Yeah, I want to start a band now called Robotic Gamelan.
You got to do it, man.
So the Gamelan, Rockstars, if you're not familiar with it, that's an instrument that like, it's like if you turned metal bowls upside down, right? Or something like that, and you hit them on top, but it's so huge, it fills up an entire room and goes all the way around the walls, doesn't it?
Yeah, so gamelan is an Indonesian, specifically like Java and Balinese instrument. Well, gamelan is actually like orchestra. So you'll have a gamelan ensemble, and it's all built out of pitched percussion. And so you have everything from like these huge pitched gongs through to like the bowls, like you're saying, and then tiny little kind of xylophone things. But your rock stars may be interested to check it out. One of the coolest things about gamelan is that a lot of instruments are built in pairs. So you'll have two people playing the exact same instrument, but the builders detune them just slightly, so you get an actual acoustic chorusing.
Oh, cool.
So the instruments are designed like that. So, I mean, gamelan music is absolutely phenomenal. And I highly recommend it if anyone is going through the process of like you're learning to make music, you're really learning engineering, or you're super deep in it, you're mixing all the time. And you find that when you try to listen to music outside of the studio, your brain goes crazy because you're just like, why they got that hi-hat on there? That vocal sound is wrong. That bass is terrible. Why is the bridge over there? Like, listen to gamelan music because it doesn't obey any of the rules of like contemporary Western music, basically. And it'll become this incredible puzzle for your brain to figure out.
That's
and
cool.
When I first started listening to it, I thought it was just like, oh, everyone's just kind of free form, like bashing on stuff. And it's not. It's like intricately kind of built and composed and performed, and it's a really phenomenal, beautiful kind of music. All pitch percussion, basically.
My introduction to gamelan was back in the 90s, right about when you were going up to London and doing that. I was traveling around with a car with a buddy of mine here with a ADAT and a DAT machine studio in the back seat.
Oh, wow.
And we would just go on adventures to go find people to record, just like where drive to some other strange city, find people, record them. And one of the people that we met through, because my buddy was a writer as well, is he had found out about a guy named Philip Yampolsky, and we went and had dinner with him. And Philip was producing a 20 CD series. This was his gig. He got a 20 CD contract for Smithsonian Folkways to go to Indonesia for 6 months at a time and document all the music there. So he was recording like giant gamelans there and bringing them back and putting them on CDs.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, a lot of fun. More adventure music, right? The first time I heard a Carl Tatz Phantom Focus mix room featuring his PFM HD1000 series monitors, I was completely blown away. It was like listening to three-dimensional sound with rock-solid bass all the way down to 20 hertz. It was really incredible. What's amazing is that a Phantom Focus system can be implemented in your existing control room or even bedroom studio, giving you world-class sound for mixing. Go see how cool your studio could look and sound at phantomfocus.com. So one of the tools that you must use a lot of, I believe, is of course Ableton Live, and then you quickly referenced Max MSP, I think is what you said. Yeah. So give us an introduction to what that is. Let the rock stars know.
To Ableton Live or to Max or to both?
I guess to both. Okay. We think of Ableton Live and maybe we think, oh, people make dubstep on that, these days. But Max is a pretty fascinating part of that too.
Yeah, Max is pretty wild. I mean, so Max MSP basically is a graphical programming language, and a little bit like if you took guitar pedals or audio processors in the studio, you can patch them together, and then the signal will flow through them in a certain way, and you can control what's happening in each of those boxes, and it will affect the signal. So Max MSP is similar, where you have these blocks. You can patch them together, and depending on where you patch things in and out, and depending what the function of the block is, you can manipulate data. Basically, it's all about data manipulation. So I focused exclusively on the Max side of Max MSP. Max is about data manipulation, then MSP deals with audio and synthesis. I started learning Max. Actually, this all happened because Bjork had this concept of patterns in music, patterns in nature. And then Mark Bell, who's one of her collaborators, again, rest in peace, Mark, she kind of brought us this revelation like the second to last gig of a 1.5-year world tour. So she was thinking about what was next. And Mark was like, oh, well, if we all learn Max MSP, then we can control visuals and we can control music and we can control instruments and that kind of stuff. So I was the one who wound up learning it. But basically, I use Max MSP to create performance systems for Bjork so that in real time, she could control relatively complex musical systems and with some quite simple gestures, generate a relatively complex musical output. And I built all of my systems to convert. The two main forms of input were a Logitech video game controller, like a PlayStation game controller, and then a pre-iPad touchscreen called the lemur. So basically, you could draw shapes onto the lemur, which would be like the shape of a melody. And then you could use the game controller to like trigger different chords or switch different melodies off and on, or change the length of musical phrases. Or, I built quite a few different systems for her. But the whole idea was that she could hold this thing in her hand, press some buttons, and sing.
Right.
And so she could, based on her own feeling and intuition, entirely drive what was happening musically. But it was also designed where you press these two buttons and you get a bit of a surprise. It's not generative, but like you might not necessarily know exactly how it's going to sound. So sometimes Bjork really enjoys like kind of feeling her way through a song. And there's actually a track on Biophilia called Dark Matter, which is still has like her original guide vocal take before there is lyrics. So she's kind of singing in these formless words, and it's just like crazy chords. It's all free time. And that was basically, she just had all these chords on thumb pads and you could control them. So Max is a way that you can do anything with data. And what we chose to do was turn it all into musical notes, which could then trigger other things. Ableton Live, their marketing and everything is very, very tied into the electronic music community. But Ableton Live is basically, for me, by far and away, the most creative environment in which you can seamlessly and rapidly manipulate audio in a musical way. So it's, for me, having grown up, all this stuff we're talking about with Pro Tools, using it very creatively, Ableton Live takes those creative capabilities in Pro Tools and exponentially amplifies them.
Right.
And what for me is so good about it is you can flow really seamlessly from having, recorded audio like a performance in your arrange page. You can drop things onto samplers, reprocess them, re-record yourself, turn sounds inside out. But it's very fast and very fun. And I've also developed a whole bunch of techniques on there. So stuff that used to take me like a week to do in Pro Tools to get to a certain point compositionally, I can get to that point in like an hour or two now in Ableton Live.
Wow.
And I'm teaching that. I have a course called the Beats Accelerator Process, which is kind of my whole system that I used to do that. I spent 4 or 5 years kind of on the side in the middle of the 2010s trying every single workstation out there in an effort to see if I could find something that could seamlessly take me from I have a blank screen through the writing phase, through the tracking phase, through editing, into fine detailed programming and mixing, all under one roof, all seamlessly, and do everything perfectly. And the spoiler alert is that system doesn't exist. So I wound up figuring out that it was better to divide my process. So I use Ableton Live to be creative, and I use Pro Tools to finish records.
Okay, very cool.
Focus on like the art of recording and engineering and stuff, or capture performances, basically.
So one of the things I remember being struck by Ableton Live right off the bat was the fact that, because I also got excited as soon as it appeared. I was like trying it out, trying to figure it out. And the fact that you just could keep making, and you didn't have to stop. With Pro Tools, you could do an idea, but you had to stop and go back and press start again to do things. And in Ableton, it was easier to just kind of manipulate sounds in real time and move while you're moving. And that was sort of their whole premise, I guess, was like you could keep going live,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and was it like Live 1 was literally just like they were the first people to have audio warping, so you could speed stuff up and slow it down. And it was like you could just run like a couple of channels of like loops at the same time. So it's almost a bit more of a DJing tool or something, wasn't it? But it really evolved. But yeah, I think what you're saying there is really true. Like the live aspect, you can really kind of play it. And the really interesting thing with live, and actually getting back to your original question about how now they have Max for live, so they have Max built in,
right?
Is live in its simplest form is just incredibly elegant and simple, and no frills, and not confusing, and the most direct way to do some basic things. But then you can kind of develop it and expand it, and with Max for Live, customize it to do almost anything you want. So, some people use it for live performance and to run all their like VJing stuff. Other people like me use it for songwriting. Other people, it's like, they make their dubstep in it or whatever. But the way that you can kind of really mold it to whatever you need is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I remember experimenting with saying, okay, what if I, mic up instruments a band of instruments, and then I have those feeding in, then can I have those go over to other tracks so that you can instantly grab loops, and now they're
Oh, wow,
looping,
amazing.
and then you jump to
Wow.
another instrument, those kind of things.
Yeah. Did that work for you?
Kind of. It was very, I spent all my time trying to get it to work as opposed to actually
Right.
making songs. That's one of the big challenges, I think, for us as, composer engineers is sometimes we can find that the thrill of connecting things and hooking things up, like conjunction junction, hooking up words and phrases is so satisfying that we forget to actually make the music after we hook it up,
That is beautifully said, and I relate so hard. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I used,
Or do you find the thing you spend like 2 months figuring something out, then it's finally working. Then when you go to write, you're like, oh, I don't need that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'd put all this effort into hooking it up. And then afterwards I was, maybe not actually do it. Or I'd say, boy, if I had this thing going, then I'd make some more music, and I would beat myself up for it for a while until one day I realized I was like, wait a minute, maybe it's okay to just take satisfaction in getting things to work and hooking them up. You don't have to be so hard on yourself.
It's Lego, isn't it?
Yeah. So when you're talking about Max MSP and creating these things for Bjork, this is actually relevant to what we just said, this idea of like making something and then you'd make the music.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's the Max MSP, controller and everything is very useful for taking a song that maybe has already been composed and how can we now perform this, this thing that has a structure and an outline to it and use this tool. Have you done it mostly like that, or have you also created Max MSP things that are now creative tools where you can start from scratch?
It's actually all starting from scratch. And I think 7 of the songs on Biophilia were written using these systems.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah. So that was actually kind of funny, was it was almost like, well, you could never play them again. Because there's so much, I wouldn't quite say, well, I mean, there's a certain element of chance involved. I mean, the most I did actually, that song, Dark Matter, I was telling you about, I built a new Max MSP patch for her to use live. And because it was such a string of complex chords with no kind of real meaning, and it was all about her own timing, I built a Max MSP patch, and then her backline tech, Sky Paul, had been learning some iOS programming. So he built an iOS app that was literally a giant button. And anytime she pressed it, it would play the next chord.
Oh, cool.
And I just built a Max MSP patch that was just like a massive list of here's all the chords in a row. So she'd be like, da, 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 press the thing, next chord, da, 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 so that was the only one we built specifically for live performance. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The way that I built those systems was very specific to the way that she wanted to work then. And what was interesting, I think, coming back to what you were saying, it's like we spend all this time building these systems or plugging things together. Then when we come to write, it's like we almost forget to write. But my goal in all those was like getting something to a point where Bjork could walk into the studio having done a vocal warm up, and I could hand her something and just say, try pressing this and this. Do you know what I mean? Like once she's like, show me a new one. And I was like, well, I'm midway through making this, and was showing her like pages and a couple of menus. And as soon as it was like, well, if you go to this one, don't do this, she was like, not interested.
Right, totally. So, yeah, it's like the times where as an engineer, you like try and show the artist, you're like, oh, but we could do this, and I have these plugins over here. And then the artist is like,
yeah, totally. Yeah,
it was fun to make music.
Totally, exactly.
But even hearing you talk about programming the Max MSP stuff, it reminds me that on every level, there's an element of hooking stuff up that we have to do as engineers. Even if it's you just want to play guitar, you've still got to get your guitar ready, string it, tune it, do all those things. Now you're ready to play. So, it's always striking that balance between like, put in some time.
Even guitar, but I'm like terrified of guitars right now because like at one point I figured out intonation is a thing. And I'm like, every time you press a thing, it's out of tune, even when it's in tune. And it's like the guitars, to get a guitar sounding good is like one of the most complex things on the planet.
Well, take a look at equal temper tuning, man. Everything is equally out of tune. That sort of blow your mind a little bit, right?
What's that whole thing? Like you please everyone, you please no one kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But no, I think, and you're really right there. There's also just, what we can do technically in the studio and from the engineering point of view, just to ensure that ideas can flow smoothly. ultimately, and how can we build our studios, or how can we run a session so that anytime someone has an idea, there's like the shortest possible path between an idea and the execution of an idea. And no matter your situation, whether you're, recording all analog or, doing stuff in Max MSP, it's a really great kind of yardstick to think about, or, a great North Star with your whole process.
A great North Star. I like that. The STX-100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX-100. A fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers, the STX-100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, AdVision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX600 modules, combining the STX100 mic pre and C610 complementer in a single 500 module. Now you can get that same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's, BBDI, and complementers. Go to spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. One of the challenges for recording your voice is getting close enough to the microphone that you get a great bass boost proximity effect without getting blasts of wind on the microphone. Try this experiment. Hold your hand in front of your mouth and say, peanut butter popcorn. Feel that blast of air on your hand? That will cause a terrible sound on your microphone called a plosive. My favorite way to avoid this is to use the JZ microphone pop filter in front of a mic. This thing is built like a tank with a flexible metal arm that I can clamp directly onto the mic stand. It has a super cool waveguide design that looks like ripples on water and prevents the plosives getting through to the mic no matter how explosive the voice gets. Plus, it lets the high frequencies through for superb clarity on the mic. Get your vocals just right and use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 20% off the amazing pop filter at jzmic.com. Hey Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Damian Taylor, joining us from Los Angeles, although you've been all over the place, Damian. Are you ready to jam?
Oh wow! First we're rocking, now we're jamming.
We're rocking then jamming.
As long as I can bring all the noodles, that's my style.
Actually, I should come up with a new one. It should be like, are you ready now for the tech shop? Are you ready to tech or like solder or something?
Totally. Actually, can I pick up on something? The funny story about all the biophilia era is that was when I was in the process of moving from the UK to Canada at the time, and I saw the industry was going in a direction where we had to be producers with our own studios. So in the middle of all that, across like that 5-6 year period, I was basically hand building analog outboard.
Oh, sweet.
Thinking that I'd need all this stuff. And also I made a deal with myself that I would only build equipment and not buy it.
Nice,
there's a lot of nuance to that, but it was wonderful because it just completely demystified analog equipment.
It might be a Canadian thing, Daniel Lanois, when was known for like, I won't rent gear, I will only buy it. So it was like flipping that around, maybe it's a Canadian thing. So what, do you still have any of the gear with you that you built?
I do, yeah. And what you're going to love this, and maybe this would be, especially for people who are newer, feeling like, oh, I don't have all the right equipment, is right around the time I built like my 3 LA2As and like, an SSL outboard compressor and stuff like that, like plugins just took another leap forward.
Right.
So, I was using it and I found I was actually just getting better results in the box. So I still have it all and I use it when I'm recording and stuff, but in my studio here in LA, it's more of like a mixing and writing and not so much of a recording thing. I still use the preamps I built, which are actually from a kit. They're still like my go-to vocal chain. 7th Circle Audio preamp, their N72 circuit, which is just a Rupert Neve classic 1272 circuit. That's phenomenal. So yeah, I still have them, but it was great, largely even just like I really said, to demystify that whole process and just understand it's all just like boxes and components in there, and it's not like one's going to kind of suddenly fundamentally change who you are or what you do.
Yeah, but building gear in the studio and learning how to solder and wiring stuff, it's so much fun. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was a little bit like, at a certain point when you do this, Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I mean, you seem to have done a little bit of everything. But sometimes it seems like you have to choose, okay, I may have to just like, you know, gracefully let go of this thing I'm interested in so I can focus on this other thing. For me, I started out with a lot of interest in the tech stuff. I learned how to solder and wire. I was really fascinated by circuit design, and I would have loved to do more of that, but I never really had like a dedicated soldering station where I could design and build gear or time in my day to do that. And I found I was just focusing on the engineering and just, making records. And then of course, learning Pro Tools.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think like you're saying, like every engineer, no matter what you're doing, should know how to solder.
Yeah.
Pardon the accent, just like building your own cables and stuff. That's the bare minimum. Even if you're just making dubstep on live, like learn how to make a cable.
Maybe we should begin by talking about what cables are. So let me pretend you're my intern.
Okay.
All right. So, okay, tell me what a TRS connector is.
Is it two right sticks?
Yeah, exactly. So I always do this as a quiz for my interns to see if they can think of the different use cases. Of course, tip ring sleeve. So we got a balanced cable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's also used for, and this is the one that always gets them that they can't think of.
For what, headphones?
Yeah, for your headphones. Yeah, dude, you're in, man. You got the gig.
I thought this might have been like, some funny trick question. But yeah, that's the thing. We just, everything has to be connected together, right? And you'll, especially again, like if you're starting, a good tip, you're going to be way better to spend some money on a soldering iron and some connectors and some good quality cable rather than spending like, $60 an individual cable for something decent,
Yeah.
It's very liberating. And like you say, this stuff is all really fun. And I think you raised a really interesting point about like, we have so many interests and so many things we need to learn. And it's like, if we could actually clone ourselves over and over, like you could 100% dedicate like 10 lifetimes just to circuit design and understanding how that all works, and 10 lifetimes just to like microphone selection, and 10 lifetimes to just studying dynamics processors and how to use them effectively in a mix. And we have to find this weird balance of like, how can we learn enough about a subject to be able to use it without losing sight of the big picture, or without actually generating, forgetting to generate the end results.
Yeah, or be unafraid to jump in and fix something in a moment's notice, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So let's talk about the elephant, the wiry elephant in the room. You have a gorgeous looking modular synthesizer sitting right next to you. Tell us about that. How do you like to incorporate actual analog synthesis with the digital stuff? And then did you build any modules for that?
I'll start at the end of your question. I did build one module for it, which was a like geranium distortion unit or something like that. I jokingly refer to the modular synthesizer as my midlife crisis.
Awesome.
Dudes who are like lawyers or work in finance, they buy a sports car. I went modular. And my big motivation for it actually was I think I got into it in like when I was 34, 35 or something. So I hit a point where I actually felt like I knew what everything in my studio did. And through my 20s, it was really so much like exploration and experimentation. Like, oh, what does a compressor actually do? What can I get out of it? How do I use EQ? How do I chain stuff together? And I've felt in many ways like I'd kind of, I wouldn't say mastered everything, but I really knew what everything was doing. Even the normal hardware synths I had, it's like they have like their envelopes and their filters, and I really just needed something in the studio that I had no idea how to use. So it's my kind of like, I don't know what this does corner, and the wonderful thing with modular is you plug a couple of things in and you think you know what's going to happen, and it does something kind of totally unexpected. So it's a little bit of that kind of energy that we're exploring with Max MSP. But it just sounds amazing. And your question about how do I incorporate it, and this is like some real talk right here. Like I don't actually use it that much.
It's like my tape machine. I hate to say it,
Yeah, it's so cool. It looks great. People think you're legit because you got all the wires and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, this whole system, I actually built it, and it's really beautiful as like a self-contained instrument. So I have two analog drum machines that sync together, and they drive all these sequencers in the modular. So it's basically like a self-contained kind of electronic orchestra that can run without the computer. So when I first put it in, I just like recorded like a couple of years of like after sessions, 2 hours of just building patches and crazy noises. And it was amazing, but I actually found it really difficult to turn those into songs. So it's been on my list for literally a couple of years now, is just like rework my approach to modular. Part of it was there was this amazing company called Expert Sleepers who built this module called the ES3. I think they're up to the ES8 now, and a plugin called Silent Way, where you could phase accurately trigger and synchronize your modular with your computer. The Ableton team released an update about a year ago called CV Tools, and you can use your audio outputs to send CV and control messages to your modular. And it's just been on my list, like spend a month just jamming with that. So I feel like I need to rediscover my modular, but it's cool. It looks really pretty. It was a lot of fun putting it together, and it does sound phenomenal. And I have other friends who just, like a really good friend of mine, especially Matt Robertson, like he has like 2 or 3 separate modular boxes, and he just leaves the patches set up all the time. And he has a whole flow where he just presses a button in Logic and it pops up, and he's like making a crazy noise like instantly. So
that's probably smart, huh?
It is very smart. Whereas I was like, well, the whole point of modular is you have to start with a blank slate every time. So I really enjoyed that whole process of building a patch and seeing what would happen. Although having said that, like actually quite a few of those things have been turned into songs. I've sent stuff to people, they've chopped them up. So I'm going to completely contradict myself. I actually have some amazing music coming out that was made with the modular.
Well, no, but I've been there. I mean, back in the 90s, we had an MS-20, a Korg MS-20, and we'd have that in the studio, and we'd hook it up. I'm like, God, it sounds amazing. And then you're like, crap, how do we get it to be in time with the song that's in Pro Tools, And then I think we got like some little CV to MIDI box or something like that, and we try messing that. But then you'd spend all day, you'd spend all day just trying to get it to work and do that one overdub, all afternoon. And you'd be so proud of yourself just for getting it in time with the music,
Yeah. And there's really this thing about like complex systems. That can I actually jump ahead of one of your jam things. This is a perfect time to bring it up, but
sure.
In the preamble to the show, you mentioned like a favorite quote. So I'm going to bring it in right now because
please do. It's perfect timing.
Einstein is probably my favorite quotee. So Einstein has this original quote directly from, I think, a lecture in like the 30s. And Einstein said, "It can scarcely be denied that the supreme goal of all theory is to make the irreducible basic elements as simple and as few as possible without having to surrender the adequate representation of a single datum of experience." And what I love most about this quote is that Einstein is actually most regularly attributed to having said, everything should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. As simple as possible, but no
simpler. I love it.
So even his original quote had to be simplified in order for people to understand it. The original quote is precise and is exactly correct, but it was actually Roger Sessions, who's a composer, I think, who is attributed to kind of making this quote famous. And he said, Einstein said everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. So it's the thing also when we get into studios, and modular is a great example, but actually the studio I had in Montreal, which was like my dream studio that I built from the ground up, and it had like 2 live rooms and this massive control room, and it could do everything, but is basically every time you switch on the studio, something would break.
Right, yeah.
Whether that's like you come in on Monday morning and 4 light bulbs blow, or you haven't like used that tie line in a while and for some reason it's not passing phantom power, or with the modular, there's just so many elements of the chain that can kind of mess up. So when I moved to LA, I really figured did some hard looking in the mirror, and it's like, what's my actual goal right now? And my goal is to finish as many amazing songs with great artists as possible. So I did I'd already sold a bunch of gear just to fit in the truck to move down to LA. And then I gradually sold off almost all of the rest of it. And I've kept the key few cool things, including the modular. But we need to, what you're saying before about being like both an engineer and a composer, or both an artist and an engineer, is you need to keep things simple enough so that you can actually be in service of your higher goals. And for me, that was like finishing and releasing as much great music as possible and focusing on the personalities I was working with.
And no simpler.
Yeah. As simple as possible, but no simpler. So you know what that means, right? The no simpler, like you still need things.
Yeah, you can narrow it down to one guitar, but by God, don't remove the strings.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Or maybe you really do need two, but that's and I think that's where it's really interesting.
Oh, it worked for the
Is
presidents of the United States of America, right?
Oh, yeah,
You
totally.
take a couple strings off.
Yeah, morphine.
Oh, right. Yeah. Weren't
Yeah,
they were
like
both those bands, like 4-string
two-string
guitar,
bass.
maybe 2-string bass.
Yeah. Good vibe. But and that's kind of also like a wonderful kind of embodiment of that. You make something really simple and then you have to be creative.
Yeah.
But, for me, GarageBand is too simple.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be happy making a record on that. I'll feel like I won't be able to actually communicate the ideas I want to, or explore ideas, or do the things to sound that I want to. So you need it. You need a system to be sufficiently complex to have meaningful results, but not so complex that you just get bogged down by it, or more importantly, that it breaks all the time.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I love writing and recording songs just on an iPhone. When I can get that to go, I love the simplicity of just saying, I'm making the studio as simple as possible, and I'm just going to focus on, like, what can I do with these words and this melody and the harmonies. And by God, it's amazing how every time I double my voice, it sounds like the first idea I had was actually a good one.
Amazing. Are you using like a DAW on the phone, or like some kind of thing to connect it, or literally voice memo stuff?
Well, I've tried different stuff. I've used, there was one called DAW that I first used in the beginning. And then I tried using the GarageBand one, but I just found that it was not simple enough for me. It was like it kept taking me in weird directions.
Right.
But then I've really loved using one called Spire Studio.
Okay.
And using that in this, over the past year, and that's been a lot of fun.
Cool. Do you have like a audio interface you connect to that?
I do, yeah. I don't know if I'm supposed to be talking about that much now, but because I think new things are coming out with that. But they have an interface that wirelessly connects to the phone, so you control the DAW on your screen.
Oh,
but the interface.
Who makes that one? Who makes
it's Isotope.
Isotope makes it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I remember seeing that little box, and I thought it literally just recorded it all on the box. I didn't realize it kind of talked to your phone.
Well, it does both, and I think the genius about it is that remember when we talked about how the early recording things had no latency. Latency became a thing. It wasn't that latency was solved early on. It just wasn't a problem early on.
Yeah.
But same thing with that, because you're using this physical unit and your headphones go in there and there's the mic. Now you're singing along and there's no latency. Whereas if I was to plug, ear pods into the phone, you have to put up with like the phasey latency stuff going on and all that. But anyway, I love keeping the studio stuff simple. I compose more music when I do that. And I think you're right. It's like put in the time to hook things up ahead of time so you can come back and, like Bjork, just walk into the room and start playing it and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd encourage your listeners as well. Like one thing I had to do when it came to simplifying the studio was, again, another long, hard look in the mirror. The whole back wall of my studio here was like a massive rack of tasty vintage synthesizers, and I set up this whole studio. For those of you listening, you can't see the room, but it's a relatively small room, maybe a couple of 100 square feet or something like that. So I set everything up, and then I was like, there's something missing in here. And I realized there was nowhere for an artist to sit. And basically the entire room was full of gear. So I had to go and have a long, hard look in the mirror. And I was like, Damian, why do you have all of these vintage synthesizers? When was the last time you used your Roland System 100M? You loved the Wasp, but when was the last time you used it? And I looked back at myself and,
too.
Yeah. And I said, Damian, the reason I have these is so that other men will be impressed when they come to my studio. Like proper real talk. We have these things here to kind of prop up ourselves and so that we feel legitimate. And it's like a safety blanket. It's like I'm the toddler going to the first day of preschool, clutching my blanket.
Yeah. Well, you live in LA right now. So, there are a lot of other people to impress.
There are, and the synthesizers are gone, and there's a couch there now. So it's just like, you know what, just like put yourself out there a little bit, make yourself feel a little bit uncomfortable, and just like let your ideas do the talking, And that's not to say my studio is short of equipment. You notice there's a big modular synthesizer and stuff, but at some point you need to just have that chat of like, I've got enough gear.
Here's my thought, man. I think you should just seek out vintage posters from the 70s and the 80s of all the gear, like their promo posters, and then just put them up on the walls.
Yeah. What's that? Is it the Moog one? If you can afford a truck, you can afford a synthesizer.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. They used to be saved for the drummer, right?
What
for the drum set? Well, I mean, it used to be all about, if you need something like that if you want to haul your drum set around, but
right.
You need a truck if you want to haul your synthesizer around.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the other records you've worked with too. You also did a record with Arcade Fire, Reflector, which is in the playlist Rockstars. A reminder that we have a playlist of Damian's work. Just scroll down through the show notes. We've got links to his YouTube. We'll have his Twitch channel, which we can talk about that too. And an audio playlist, Spotify, and you can go check out the websites and stuff. But that's a very cool record too. Share a story about working with those guys.
Okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do is massively reduce any thoughts about what my role was on that record. So basically, Arcade Fire, I became friends with them when I was touring with Bjork. We wound up on the same bill all the time, and I was looking to leave the UK. So wound up in Montreal eventually. So they were good friends, and basically on Reflector, I wound up doing all of Regine's vocal recording and production. She was pregnant with her little boy at the time. I had a couple of young kids, so I was like a very mother-friendly, peaceful environment that was away from like an army of dudes who was, at their normal studio. So their main engineer, Mark Lawson, deserves a massive shout out. I also did like a couple of bits of editing, so it's much more like they were friends and I'd pop in and do things here or there, but really it was all of Regine's vocals. A good thing to look up, my main kind of collaboration with them was actually we did a couple of remixes together for a couple of tracks off the Suburbs. So there's Sprawl 2 and Ready to Start. And they knew that they wanted to kind of, they'd been trying to access a bit more of like a dance floor mentality or a club influence mentality, and they didn't quite hit it. Ready to Start had this whole end section that they couldn't quite get to work on record. And they basically sent those to me and said, do what you want, but you have to only use our original sounds and edit it like, you're mentioning 24-hour Party People, a bit like the New Order, like 12-inch edits. So like this kind of classic approach to doing remixes where we're going to edit and extend and strip back. So those are kind of my favorite collaborations with them. Then I actually did a ton of sessions with them at the start of their last album, the name I can't even remember. But it was like at the stage before it actually really turned into the session. So I think I'm uncredited on that. But it was just, they were just starting to get going. It was like, can you just come down and just literally turn up?
Yeah, I like that for a name of a record, the name I can't even remember. That should be the name of something, right?
Yeah. So, but their whole recording methodology like gives me anxiety just thinking about it. I mean, it's phenomenal, and the work that like Mark does, just keeping track of everything, because there's, I think, 7 members, and someone will come in and say, hey, last year I recorded a guitar part, like find it, and Mark is somehow able to like pull these things out of the air, and then they'll come in and they'll jam on stuff for ages, and it's like throwing stuff away, and so they have a really amazing process. But yeah, I can't claim too much. So we had this peripheral crossover, and I do have credits with them, and obviously it's a slightly higher profile one, so people tend to bring it up a bit more.
Yeah, well, it's all right. We like to do that too.
Yeah. But it's a good lesson as well. Like, anytime you see credits on someone's discography or whatever, check out what their role actually was. So, I did a very valuable role. They were stoked. Regine's vocals on there are great. I'm very good with vocalists. And I think going back to our first question, that was really what I learned from Guy, which he learned from Trevor Horn, is basically vocal production. So I'm kind of like in the Trevor Horn lineage of vocal producers.
The Envoy Pro Electron is the fastest, toughest, mini-sized, universal portable USB-C SSD that lets you record from anywhere in the galaxy with confidence. With speeds of up to more than a gigabyte per second real-world performance, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron gives you high-speed audio data for recording and playback. Take your sessions and sample libraries with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crushproof. Never worry about the storage and safety of your work again. Find the new OWC Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. I love using iZotope plugins for my music and podcast productions. In fact, you're hearing Ozone and RX on my voice in this podcast episode. And now you can get access to all the iZotope plugins through the new subscription bundle. For only $19.99 per month, Music Production Suite Pro is designed for the serious recording, mixing, and mastering engineer, putting the finishing touches on music, film, and podcasts with fully pro versions of Ozone, RX, Neutron, Nectar, Neoverb, Tonal Balance Control, Visual Mixer, and more, including free plugin updates. And just for you, Rockstars, get an extended 30-day free trial subscription at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Coupon not valid for subscription. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk a little more about vocals. So, the records that you have done there is a consistency of great sounding vocals on them. I hear, male and female voices. I hear vocals that can sound really breathy. Some of the Bjork stuff was, I think on Vespertine Undo, which I'm not sure if that was specifically the one you did, but breathy, distorted vocals that are kind of editing out from left and right. It sounds like you've got a good grasp on getting an intimate vocal sound, but also like, blending in some harmonic distortion and things like that to really make it read well. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that work well for that?
Yeah. The most critical thing with vocals and with production as a whole is phase and tuning. Working with Guy was fascinating because he would just tell me to keep turning up the vocal louder and louder and louder. And I, mentioned listening to like grunge bands and stuff when I was a teenager, like My Bloody Valentine's a great example, where the vocals are always kind of buried. So you need to get your vocals to a point where they can be like twice as loud as the rest of the track, but still be cohesive. So a lot of this actually does come into, especially when you're marrying stuff with programming, the actual placement of vocals. So I do a lot of very fine detailed tweaks to vocals. And I think I have a very, very good sensitivity to vocal performances and how to use kind of like micro editing and performance enhancement to ensure that it is locking with a track the right way. And that's kind of about 90% of the battle, is just that the vocal tuning and timing is right. And this is where you also, it's a bit like if you're doing kind of, shall we say, like a live off the floor kind of documentary style approach, that's not going to work with vocals because it's really like you're capturing a performance of individuals. So what I'm talking about very specifically is going back to my introduction, that fusion of like synthetic and organic.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like modern CGI. Like I was talking to an artist yesterday about Guillermo del Toro films, and Pan's Labyrinth. You have live action, but then you also have like these creatures.
That's a great movie, by the way.
It's a great movie.
We watched it this year, I think.
It's you really need to think about getting vocals to sit well in programming like a film like that. It's like if you just had a documentary film, and then you put animation on top of it, then it would look like kind of Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Right.
But to get them to work together seamlessly it's a really, really detailed process. So I tell people this all the time, but it's not really sexy because you can't download good editing. Do you know what I mean? So if we can get over into like the actual processing side of things, and I think my biggest breakthrough around vocal processing and vocal mixing, I haven't really heard people talk about this, but I spend a lot of thought on how to control the fundamental frequencies of a vocal. And my vocal chains are almost all built in a way where I have like a shaping, like a transparent shaping and sometimes corrective stage, which involves normally the like DMG equality is my favorite equalizer on that side.
Interesting.
Some multi-band compression, normally only hitting the fundamentals. And then I'll use that to generate a signal which has the right balance of energy to present to the character parts of the vocal chain. So that's when you'll get into like compressors that actually have a style and a sound, and choosing the right one based on the part. And as you go through your chain, I'm very often using literally like 4, 5, 6 compressors on a vocal, each doing like a slightly different thing.
Yeah.
And then, knowing where, at which point in the signal chain to introduce harmonic stuff. Like, as you know, if you introduce it earlier, when there's larger dynamics, you'll get your harmonics will kind of be brought out on peaks or whatever.
Yeah.
If you put it at the end of a chain, then you can get a more overall balanced kind of like harmonic control that's more consistent. So being very careful about where you place that. And then for me as well, the biggest thing, like probably my biggest mixing tip for people, and just briefly touching on the Twitch thing, I do every now and then, I do track feedback streams for people. And a lot of people want like mixed feedback. And I think people don't understand the power of delay. And basically, like 90% of my spatial effects are all delay with a tiny, tiny bit of reverb. So different lengths of delay, different types of delay. My whole vocal template is basically, I think, 8, 9, 10 delays that are all different lengths.
Wow.
And I kind of like blend them out across, all of my vocal channels wind up having 10 aux sends. But it's like you put a tiny bit of slap, a bit more eighth, a little fraction of 16th, and then there's one that's
you're almost creating your own reverb.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that I was actually, again, very blessed. We haven't really talked about like the whole process of my time being freelance in London, but I got to sit in the room with basically so many of the phenomenally talented mixers and producers in London. So the first time I got to sit in on a mix with Spike Stent, like just when he hit stop, just hearing the delay trails like changed my life.
Yeah.
And because you think like, oh, there's this amazing huge reverb on stuff. And I think it might have even literally been like one crazy patch off an H3000 or something, but it's just like this cluster of delays where you get the sense of space and depth, but it doesn't cloud the way that a reverb will. So yeah, you're exactly right. You have all these different lengths of delays, and based on where you're sitting them, you can kind of create like a sense of space or dimension for a vocal. I'm also a huge proponent of just LCR panning.
Yeah.
Occasionally I'll have a couple of low harmonies that are like about 20 either side, but almost all of it is just like, it's either in the middle or hard left or hard right.
Yeah.
And once I kind of realized that as well, that simplified things in a way that was incredibly useful.
Simplify, but not too simple.
Yeah. And then, you can kind of achieve a lot more. And I found also, I've had people mock me on Twitter, and in a joking way. I tweeted once like, 8th note delay till I DIE. And someone was like, you can't have delays in time. It's like a brilliant mixer. So I know he was kind of teasing me a little bit. He was like, come on, you just got to slide it off a little bit. He's like, grid delays are for cops, I think he said at one point. I was like, okay. But here you get into this thing where it's kind of a bit of like, if there's a sound of my production, which is really like big vocals on like electronics and tight stuff, or even, bands or whatever, it's being able to have the vocals sit in a place where when you have these delays, they sit in the right place on the beat. So everything kind of like merges together musically and works together. And again, this depth and dimension comes into the frame without just clouding out.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant what you said. The idea that the electronic composition and then the organic vocal going together, I guess it depends on your intention, because obviously Who Framed Roger Rabbit was intended to be one way, and
that is
Pan's Labyrinth was intended to be another way. But more often than not, we're hoping it will be like Pan's Labyrinth, and we're ending up with Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Maybe
which is
Lawnmower Man would be a better reference, that early VR one.
Yeah, or just like turn on Netflix and pull up some B budget movie. And look at all the sci-fi effects, and they all kind of look that way these days. But it's just that idea of you end up with that thing when you hear somebody's work and you, or you hear your own work and you think, you're like, that just sounds like an electronic beat with some vocal just kind of thrown over the top of it, as opposed to something that sounds like it's really going together.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to dig my heels in with this question a little bit. Vocal manipulation, tuning vocals, and you talked about the importance of timing. I have long had a process of exporting the vocals from Pro Tools, going over to Melodyne to work on them there, because I can move around in Melodyne more quickly if I stay in the studio and then coming back over to Pro Tools and putting them in. But very early on, you discover, you put them back in, you're like, what the fuck? These aren't even lined up anymore. Like it's completely moved around and stuff. Have you run into some challenges with like moving vocals, to another program and back in and feeling like where do you find that you can make those accurate decisions about the timing of the vocals?
So I do exactly the same process, but maybe it's whichever button I have ticked on my export. I throw everything into Melodyne because what you say about moving faster is 100% accurate. Then there's also like when I'm in Melodyne, I'm thinking exclusively about timing and tuning, which is great. Yeah. I'm not thinking about anything else, but they all line up fine at my end. I don't know if there is like an earlier version. Like there is an earlier version of Melodyne where all the sibilants would get messed up. Mm-hmm. And the breaths would sound like they were kind of going through cellophane. So you'd have to then go through and like manually replace all the S's. And but no, I really trust Melodyne. Actually, a number of years ago, I did a massive test of every single tuning solution on the market, and because I'd been on Melodyne since like 2006, I think. Yeah. So it was like my side gig for like a year was trying literally everything, and this was around the time. What do they call it? It's like there's like a 3-letter thing. Like I think Studio One was the first people to have it, where you click a button and it just automatically goes into like
what is it? Sorry, I can't want to butcher the name.
So I think like, sometimes it'll automatically go into Melodyne, or there's a Synchro Arts. What's that one vocal line that was kind of built into some of them? Yeah. And I remember seeing like some of the demos where it's like, here, how these vocals are all out of time. And now we click the button, it goes boom. And you go like, oh my God, that's amazing. Right. But what I realized was I was working with vocalists who were good enough that the after on those demos was actually where I was starting, because my singers are already good and I was looking for like that final 2% or something like that. Right. And I found anything that tries to do it automatically it gets it wrong every single time. I find that's true of all the tools we have in the studio. All the automatic things will get you almost all the way there. I love that you're saying that, because almost there is worse than not doing it at all, because then you have to go back and fix it all, right? Yeah, but many years ago you got comfortable with the fact that for the next 4 to 8 hours you were going to be going from the beginning of the song to the end, manually adjusting things, Yeah, well, I still do that. It's like I've figured out a whole flow in my productions overall where I'm going to disappear for 2 weeks now, and you're not going to hear from me, and you're going to wonder what's happening with your record. And trust me, you don't want to be around for this part, because I'm going to be so deep in the computer that all my social skills will vanish and you'll lose faith. Don't listen to the monitor mixes right now because they're chaos. And I've had labels like lose faith with me in that period, but then it's like suddenly you have this thing where it all goes boom, everything's ready, and then I can do the final creative thing and mix and and it all goes bloop and comes together. But yeah, the timing's really important. This is also like one of the things with Ableton Live, the way that sampling works in there. Like I can get all this stuff that I was previously only trusting to Pro Tools in terms of like phase accurate and sample accurate tightness. I feel like we need to like troubleshoot your situation with Melodyne. I know I noticed it early on, and I feel like I just assume it's always there. It may have gotten better, but let's say I took all the vocals from Pro Tools and I went over to Melodyne and all I did was tune and I didn't do any time adjusting, and then I bring them back in. If I zoom in against the original vocal, you'll see that they're shifting around like significantly, like, Right. Well, I don't know what the timing would be, but it'd be enough to, move the beginning of a word and stuff like that. And so there were periods where I went through and I'd chop up all the vocals again in Pro Tools and I'd re-line them up to the original to make sure that they still started at the same place. Yeah. But I think that, for me, the takeaway was that final location, hearing it and mixing it in Pro Tools, that's what I always love about Pro Tools. It still, to me, is my top editing solution. 100%. Like I can zoom all the way and I can feel confident that I know exactly what's happening at this sample or whatever, Yeah, perfect. That's a beautiful way to sum it up. And I learned some things from some of my mentors about, ways to edit without having to rely on grids and look at the screen and stuff like that. One of my favorite ones, I'll mention it again here, and maybe you've got one you want to throw back at me, but I like to, let's say we just did a performance with the band and the bass player hit a wrong note or messed up in a transition. I like to just listen to a section where it's good
and then tap on the down arrow in time so that it's starting a selection. And then as soon as that bass note starts, start tapping on the up arrow until I get to the end of the selection.
Mm-hmm.
Then I can hit copy, jump to, maybe the bad section is coming up. Just let it keep playing, start tapping the down arrow and hit paste. And without zooming in, without looking at a grid, you can get most of an edit done that way.
That's amazing.
So quickly, you know.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, and I've seen people do, you know, I think I learned that from Brad Jones, and I saw, I don't remember if it was, I saw somebody on an old Mitsubishi digital machine, I think it was, or something like that. Maybe it wasn't the Mitsubishi, maybe it was the Sony digital machine, where it had an ability to copy audio off the tape into the digital buffer, and then you could fly to another place on the tape and then just hit the button to paste it back onto the tape. And it was like an early version of doing that. And I was, you know, struck by that, and struck by the fact that we don't always have to rely on these crutches, these visual crutches. You know, we can use our ears, which is, I imagine, what you're doing all the time when you're just editing in the computer and making all these micro edits and stuff.
I would say that I use waveform like you might if you were a classical musician using a score. So again, going back to like the early phases of working with Guy like super intensively, I found that there is a process where my ability to read waveform kind of went through the roof.
Right.
And I noticed one day that I could see waveforms coming out of people's mouths in real time.
Great.
So, and then I have a thing now where I've done a few records. Like there's a band called Fried, which is actually the guitar player and songwriter from Fine Young Cannibals did this record that was kind of like inspired by like vintage Motown, Wu-Tang Clan, and then he had like a gospel singer from the American South. It was an amazing record, didn't really do anything, but everything is like wonky and kind of like, you know, not on a grid. So I visually can look at stuff now and know where it should sit. But I actually find it's way faster for me to still use my eyes, because I just like develop that.
Yeah.
But it's married to an understanding of how's that going to sound. So it's not that everything sits specifically on the grid.
Yeah.
Or depending on what the phrase is. So
let's talk about bass for a second. That's one of those first things you discover, especially a played string bass, and you start trying to get the pocket right. And it's always amazing how far back it needs to sit to sound right on time.
Yes.
And I always wondered about that. And I figured maybe what it is it could just be the phase of things lining up. But I think it's also that the finger touches the string ahead of the actual hearing of the note. And our brain associates the finger being in time with being in the pocket or something.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. So you really need to learn all these tricks and quirks of what actually is in time and what sounds in time, and different vocal syllables are in time differently. Like Y is in time differently to do.
Oh, you're more advanced than me. I didn't record Bjork for 6 years, so I don't have that level yet.
Well, I also, none of it's on my discography, but I paid my rent for a number of years in London by tuning and timing boy bands.
Oh, nice. Wow. That's hardcore.
It was either that or doing like, you know, kind of experimental avant-garde breakbeat remixes that were getting played out at Fabric or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, bass is amazing. And actually bass was like my first like rock instrument or whatever. Like I loved bass. And yeah, you summed it up perfectly. There's these other things our ears associate with how a sound works, and really like this whole process of learning what is a sound, where does it flow, where does it fit. Guy Sigsworth even had a thing. He had this whole like system for MIDI pitch bends and bending notes, and where a bend had to start and where a bend had to finish for your ear to perceive it as like it's bending in time.
Oh, interesting.
So all that stuff is really, really fun to learn, and then kind of understanding like the feeling that you'll get by where things sit relatively. But yeah, bass is great, and you sum that one up.
You know, and I guess another thing you learn when you start digging into editing is that if you line everything up together, you might keep layering things on thinking you're adding more impact, but it doesn't. It's like, you know, you add tom hits and you line up all the tom hits together, or you add them to something else and you're like, why don't I hear it? Until you realize that they need to be spread out in time in order to hear it.
Yeah.
And then one day you zoom in on a clap sample. Yeah. And you look at it and you're like, oh, look at that. It's 1, 2, 3. And that makes a clap sound, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that's where it gets really fascinating. And this is where like we have this degree of control. So it's actually making the choices like where do we actually need to line things up and then where do we need them spread out. Um, when I did my audio engineering course when I was like 18, I remember when they were breaking down there's a different parts of the sound. And apparently transients take up like 70% of our brain's kind of processing power in processing a sound is dedicated to the transient.
Yeah.
So that very first initial thing like you're talking about with the bass. And so we can use that in two ways. Either exactly like you're saying, we spread them out so that our brain can process there are these different things, or we can line up the transients when we're making like a bigger sound. And then our brain doesn't have to process different transients and can have more processing left over for the tone.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Example. So this is where we get into stuff like drum layering, right? Like if you're re-triggering a snare, if it's a live performance, or if, a lot of the stuff that I do where we kind of came out of like the breakbeat scene, but we want to use classic breaks, but make the physics work in a different way. So we actually need to add in layering to the drums that has elements and parts of the sound that weren't in the original.
Right.
And if you have like the kick off your break and an electronic kick out of time or flammed separately, then it's just really sloppy and you don't get any impact. But if you can unify it together, then the brain perceives it as like the drums. So you can kind of have things like pop in and out of focus. Again, that unity or that distinction based on where you're putting them in time. But that was, I really love what you're saying. Like if you just stack everything up like that was kind of a mistake I used to make. I used to always try and have like 4 or 5 snare layers. And a lot of that was kind of fun. Like Guy and I discovered in Pro Tools, like, oh my God, this is so tight that they actually will be in time. A little aside for your listeners who don't know the history, MIDI, when we used to have to send signals down a cable to a sampler, is it's a serial processing protocol. So you can't have 5 sounds all hitting precisely at the same time.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, the signals all have to go down in a row. So this was also like the massive advantage that Guy and I jumped onto was like, let's do everything in Pro Tools because we can get this level of tightness that no one on the planet is able to do right now. So that became a very interesting philosophical point. And like you guys, if you haven't listened to Guy Sigsworth's work, like he's absolutely phenomenal. He had a project called Frou Frou with Imogen Heap.
Yeah.
That was like their artist project. His song, What It Feels Like for a Girl from Madonna is incredible. Absolute legend. I didn't mention the fact like he was pitch, has perfect pitch. He read music at Cambridge, like studied early music, plays like the harp, like absolute musical genius.
Spell his name for the rock stars just so that they got
Guy,
it.
Guy, and then Sigsworth, Sigsworth. So he came out of a heavy duty classical background, but he could apply like the Cambridge University musicologist mindset to the music that was on pirate radio in London. So we would drive around town in his Mini going to sessions, and he'd be like, he was a terrible driver, terrifying driver, driving with one hand while like going through the radio dial, trying to like find pirate radio stations.
In a Mini, no less.
In a Mini, yeah. And he'd go like, oh, isn't this fascinating? The way they're using triplet swings and they're juxtaposing it against pitched up, blah, blah, and he'd just like break down exactly what's happening in this track. But he really had his like finger on the pulse of this is what's happening like in London. This is what's happening on the underground right now. And now I'm going to like by ear transcribe a trumpet solo to do a edit on paper with a staff. And then and also I thought all producers were like that, and he was basically the only person I've ever worked with where every idea that he had would work. Do you know what I mean? So that was like a bit of a funny learning experience, because I always thought you just have to just keep adding the things until it's done, and actually that's not really the way creativity normally works. I learned finally just throw all the stuff at the wall and then delete most of it, and then what's actually left is what makes a track good.
That's awesome.
But point being, like when we started doing that with snare drums or whatever, it's like, oh, we would use different drum layers as like EQ. It's like, oh, you want a bit more brightness, let's like fade up the bright snare, and you need it to be a bit fatter, let's fade up the like fat one, or you want a bit more character or tail, then you fade up that one.
Yeah, like drawbars on an organ.
Yeah, beautifully said. So that was really cool. But then at a certain point, I switched over to like, let me just spend a bit more time finding the right sound. And you can bring a bit more.
Yeah.
And then if you need to layer, or, like you're saying with the claps, if you need to give a bit more vibe and put some like transient blur around it, then you'll add in layers to kind of like bring in a different effect.
Rockstars, I am super excited to announce that I'm doing a full studio remodeling here at the Toy Box Studio, headquarters of Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm working with the amazing studio designer Carl Tatz to upgrade my control room to a Phantom Focus mix room, and have also been improving the sound of my entire studio room by room. The first time I heard one of Carl's Phantom Focus mix rooms featuring the PFM HD 1000 series monitors, I was completely blown away. It felt like I was listening to three-dimensional sound where I could close my eyes and reach out and touch the instruments with crystal clear bass radiating from a 50-foot wall of pure marble. It was by far the best sounding mix room monitors I have ever heard anywhere. Check out my complete interview with Carl Tatz on episode 50 of the podcast and discover the secret to massively improving your monitor setup at carltatzdesign.com/mixroom-mentor. One of the nice ways to manage that can be sometimes just committing. So committing helps with that. So for example, if you do layer 5 things, turn it into one thing. And with tape, we used to do that more often, because then tomorrow, if you come back and that 5-layer thing actually sucks against a single snare, you'll know it right away. But when you're looking at 6 snares against 1 snare on a computer screen, your brain really latches onto those 6 snares and doesn't want to that's 6 things you have to lose if you let go of them,
Yeah. It's a great point. And also you're getting into this really interesting point as well about like our subjective process around the work we've done will influence how we think it sounds.
Yeah, big time.
So like I put all this work into making this, it must be good.
Right.
Well,
it is.
Absolutely. But yeah, I got to work with the Prodigy on a couple of records, and I remember like Liam Howlett really blew my mind because he was the first person I worked with who would just like torch a track. We'd work on like, there's one track we spent literally 5 days working on a bass and kick drum. And then he was just like, oh no, mate, well, fuck it off. It's not working. Just got rid of it, didn't care, or you'd work on a song that be thinking like, this is amazing, like it's a Prodigy song. And I'm just there kind of serving what Liam does. Like it's very weird to just define my role in that, but you just think like, this is the most amazing thing ever. It's the best song the Prodigy have ever done. Then he comes in the next day with his laptop, opens it up and goes, no, mate, fuck that off. Listen to this. And he'd have like taken the core of the song and recontextualized it, like sometimes built an entirely new track that was still the same track. Somehow, like whatever that essence is he was looking for, and he'd be able to like just do something totally different. And some songs would go through like 4 or 5 kind of scorched earth versions.
Yeah. Wow.
That was incredible to see. It was almost like he really understood if these few elements aren't working together and communicating the thing. And he also had this amazing yardstick was like, that's not Prodigy. Just like this amazing sense of like, is it the thing that I'm making? Is it the essence of this project? And he's the only person I've ever heard like use that term that way. And I think it sums up a lot about what makes the Prodigy so special.
Yeah.
You just know like it's good, but it's not Prodigy. It's not badass enough.
A lot of growling bass lines, right?
Kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, they've been through so many great different phases, but learned a lot from him. And he was kind of like the polar opposite of Guy Sigsworth as well. With Guy, everything was like, everything was perfect. But Liam would like tease me and insult me if he caught me like putting a fade out on something. Be like, what the fuck are you doing, man? It's like, nah, just bosh it in. It goes bosh. Like, so I kind of learned to be like raw and to use Pro Tools like in kind of almost like an aggressive kind of punk way. So learn this whole different approach to using audio from him. Like,
so in other words, if the end of something, if it chops off, that's a musical statement as opposed to a mistake that needs to be cleaned up.
Exactly, yeah. And you're not trying to make everything pretty. And actually, after I started working with him, I started doing a lot of stuff where if I was using like breaks and programming with breaks, you'd choose the snare and put that where you want to be. Then you'd open up like a little bit of the oxygen before or afterwards.
Oh, I like that. Open up the oxygen.
So, yeah. So you start getting this like really amazing way of getting like layered textures and almost like breaking the unity of stuff just to like really underline the juxtapositions that are going on.
That's pretty cool. One of the first moments I remember discovering the power of editing in Pro Tools was we were producing a band. We were up at Smart Studios at Butch Vig's place in Madison.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
And I took something that was not a snare drum that just had a verb on it or whatever. And I grabbed it and I chopped it and I stuck it underneath the snare and then like trimmed the beginning of it. Now all of a sudden this other sound became it was like reverb of a guitar chord through an amp.
Mm-hmm.
And that became the snare verb. And it like ended up on the final version of the song, which of course the record label dropped and never released anyway. So it doesn't really matter. But, and that was a band called the Trixo. But the power of stuff like that about taking things and saying like, this is not, well, I'll use the elephant reference again. This is not an elephant, but we're going to stick it here and paste it onto the elephant sound. Yeah. And it becomes something you really can transform into something different. Samples kind of gave us that too, because you can just hit a key and play it along with stuff. And
yeah.
But that's fun to do.
It ties in with like your point before about transients and when they all line up. And it's like, that's where you can get clever. Sometimes you line things up so your brain processes it as one, but you're adding like a different dimension to a sound where it's like, almost like if everything's trying to play the same dimension, then it kind of, Bjork was the first person to tell me, it's like you put so many colors in here, it's just turned beige.
Right. Right. Well, we all know about doing the gray or the beige mix where you try and balance everything perfectly.
Exactly.
And then you end up with nothing. iZotope, I mentioned them. Do you, are there any, I know they have a lot of vocal processing tools. Mm-hmm. Are those some of the things that you've found useful in your production?
I love using vocal synth on drums.
Oh, really? Talk about that.
Yeah. There's actually, we mentioned like there's a YouTube thing, but this segues nicely. Like for the listeners, I have a very small YouTube channel. I put up like 3 videos, have a bunch more about to come, but it's very early days, but there's a couple of track breakdowns. But I like using vocal synth to make weird percussion parts. So
tell us what vocal synth does first.
Okay. So I don't really understand, which is what I love about it, but it's kind of does like vocody stuff and vocal resynthesis. I guess they have all these different modes that are very, very clever. So it kind of combines the characteristics of 2 sounds, and it's perfect for like having a vocal line and playing a chord, and then you get this massive chord. And their kind of demo video for it is incredible, where there's, I forget the producer's name, but he's like going, yo, I'm working on this remix and I'm like playing these chords, and he's just got the vocal and it's like just a vocal going through vocal synth and it just sounds amazing. You're like, shut up and take my money. That's the best thing I've ever heard. Very contemporary sounding. And I mean, vocal synth too does a lot more than just like a traditional vocoder. And that's where I say like a little bit, I don't quite know what it does. And it's a little bit in the modular synth category for me, that sometimes I like having a few things that I don't quite understand just yet. But I really like using it on drums when I'm trying to make like a weird percussion thing that you can't quite place. So a perfect example, this is a track breakdown that's on my YouTube video. There's an artist in Vancouver called Louise Burns, and I co-produced her record with her. And there's this very kind of like trippy track. I wanted to have like a kind of an underpinning percussion thing that might sound almost a little bit kind of hand drum, a little bit tribally, but not. And do you know what I mean? Like when you play something with a hand drum, you have like that kind of pitch variation and the tone variation.
Yeah, totally.
So it wound up being like 6 different kick drums kind of sequenced together, all different character, but then you run them through vocal synth and it kind of squashed them all into like a much more specific range. And it kind of it just totally transforms them into something else. So
I'm gonna spin back on the film thing, because we were actually watching an old Harry Potter movie, and my daughter, who's 15, she's got an eye. She's like, oh, CGI. The kids love to say that, like, oh, it looks like old CGI or something. Mm-hmm. But it's what you said about the Who Framed Roger Rabbit thing, where you start out with this, collection of disparate elements, and sometimes doing the really cool thing that I feel like I'm hearing you do in your records is you figure out how to bring them all together and put them in a new package, which it sounds like you're describing that. It's like all these kicks, you start using a tool like vocal synth, and now it sounds like they're coming from the same speaker or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's a really interesting unification. And on that record as well, a big part of the sound is the really precise combination of programmed and organic elements. So that's actually a full track breakdown where I take, show everyone like every single layer that's in the drums. There's like, the full drum kits on there. We had like people playing flight cases on snare drums with like the flam transients, all that kind of stuff. But how to get some things like sit in behind and you just get like a sense of room, but it feels like it's coming off this electronic thing on the front. Other things really step out as like distinct layers and elements. And otherwise, like isotope wise, I use Insight 2 on everything.
Yeah. That's the metering plugin.
It's a metering one. Yeah, exactly. So I like using that just at the end of my mixes, like just to make sure that the version I'm sending off to people are good. I need to do a massive shout out for RX as well.
Yeah.
My partner's a director, and I did audio post on a short film for her. I started an audio post, by the way, in New Zealand before I moved to London, so I had a little bit of experience on that side. But they had one day to shoot a scene, and they booked a house out in the desert, like way out in the desert, and their neighbor had a fire. And a fire engine came and parked in the house, like the property was, spread out, but it's still like a massive fire engine going. And they had to film these scenes in a bathroom that's basically like someone sitting there and thinking and breathing. And then like they burst into tears. And RX was able to pull out literally the sounds of the vibrating in the bathroom and isolate like just the voice that was in the room. And it was like breaths.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I've done sessions where an artist brought me a vocal choir that he had recorded, and we were putting it into the record, flying it in. And he was like, I hear the feet and like the papers rustling from the choir. Can you take those out? And I was like, let's take a look,
Right. Yeah.
Next thing you know, we were able to just draw them right out and take them right out of the sound. And it's pretty incredible.
Scary, isn't it? Like that level of stuff that they're working on.
Now, on the other end of that spectrum, both of our voices on this mix are going to be running through RX.
Okay.
Just using this sort of like the automatic tools like deplosive and declick and denoise and everything. And they're super useful for podcast mixing.
Yeah, declick is terrifying. Actually, I mixed a record for Evanescence a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
One of the mix notes came back and was like, oh, there's a vocal click at such and such. And I was like on this crazy deadline, and I was like to the producer, like, can you sort this out? And he was like, sure. And then he just said, oh yeah, I wound up just trying this isotope mouth declick and just used the stock setting and hit go on it. And so, I got it and started using it, and that is saving me. I find, you'll go 3 albums in a row where it's not a problem. Then you have that one record, and it would have been just spending all day drawing out clicks.
Yeah. Remember how we used to do it? Pencil tool, zoom in. Yeah. Oh my God. And now it's just like select the whole thing, what the setting when it opens up, process, and then you're done. So yeah, very cool.
It's kind of wild.
So we're nearing the end here, but let me jump forward. Let's see. I got a couple of questions I wrote down. See if I can find a good one from one of the audience. Well, Chaz Root asked one. He was like, if Avid suddenly went out of business and you could no longer use Pro Tools, what new DAW would you adopt and why? And I think we already know the answer. You narrowed it down to Ableton and Pro Tools.
So Avid are making Pro Tools. So I'd be in live. I have found it really beneficial to mix elsewhere. And, we touched on it briefly, but basically, I like having the environment in live where I feed my brain all the signals. Now we're being creative. We're only thinking about ideas. Then in Pro Tools, it's like, what do we need to finish it? So I even have different sets of plugins in each of the DAWs. Like I don't have all of my mixing plugins in live.
Oh, cool.
So I feel like I'd still want to have a different environment to go into. I'd probably use Studio One to mix in. In my whole 4-year thing, I really like Studio One. I thought they had everything nailed, but there's a couple of things in there I don't like, and specifically like the creative audio editing. Like I was in touch with the developers, and I was like asking about being able to like pitch stuff up and down without a vary speed on, and they're just like, why? And so it's like, but they do so many things so brilliantly, but it's much more from like the kind of tape flow, the engineering mentality. So I love Studio One. I thought that was great. Yeah. So I'd probably go and mix in Studio One if there is no Pro Tools.
Very cool.
But stay in live to be creative.
All right, here's one from James Cassidy. James asks, and he's at Plan 4 Studios, if you could have been a part of engineering, recording, or mixing any album of the past, what would it have been and why?
It would be either the Public Enemy stuff with Bomb Squad, and I actually met Chris Shaw, who engineered all that, and kind of like lost my mind and had to try not to fanboy all over him. We were on a panel together at AES. Or funnily enough, it's funny that you mentioned the Smart Studio stuff. I would go for Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream.
Nice.
And incidentally, the way that they used early Pro Tools, they would like record sections of the song with like entirely different drum kits and then edit them together afterwards. Like I was trying to do that when I was 18 and on the 4-channel Pro Tools system at School of Audio Engineering. So yeah, those would be my picks.
Yeah, and I think I noticed on the GPS management site that Billy Bush was one of the group there from Smart Studios, right?
Yeah, met Billy as well, managed to hold it together.
Right on.
And then incidentally, actually, when I was working on The Killers, like Alan Moulder came and mixed some stuff. And
cool.
I mean, that's a whole other story, but just like he's done so many incredible records that were so influential on me, and I forgot about most of them. We were in the studio together for a week. I was kind of basically like final edits and stuff in the live room. He was mixing in the mix room. And I'd just be sitting there and go like, oh my God, he did that Curve album. And then like, you know, lose my shit. And then like, oh my God, he mixed Siamese Dream. And oh my God, he did this. Oh my God, he did that. But yeah, so
that's why,
you know, it's tempting to go like, I would have wanted to be there for the Beatles. But I think genuinely like what would have been fascinating is, you know, those eras for me where the technology was kind of like stepping up and people were pushing those boundaries.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. So you have a YouTube channel, which you mentioned. You also have a Twitch channel. Tell us about that.
So the year before pandemic, I wound up taking out about 4 months. My father passed away from a brain tumor. So I took out a number of months and looked after him in the last stages of his life. And that was a really interesting point to just reflect on my career as a whole and on learning and what was happening in the industry and the direction of the industry, and also what it was like to be a very long way away. So as a teenager in New Zealand, and I had to move to the other side of the world to London to be involved with making records. And as I mentioned earlier, I was very lucky where I got to be in the room with some of the most brilliant people on the planet. And I was also reflecting on the fact that the way the industry has gone now, we're all producers with our own real estate. So in LA, my studio's in my house. What I'm getting to is I don't have an intern. I don't have an assistant. I've never really found it's worked for me. And I started thinking like, how can I kind of replicate the benefits that I found from working in a large multi-room studio, both for me in terms of feeling connected to other people, and also like I'm at a point in my career where I want to give back and share some of the knowledge I had. I don't want to take all of my secrets to the grave. You know, so being there for the end of my father's life was just like, okay, what's all going to happen to this? He was a pediatrician and he actually like wrote a book on autism, and he was very involved in the first wave of people accurately diagnosing autism. He would go into schools, talk to staff members. He would, you know, educate like teachers, families. So very involved in actually having a lasting impact. So I was like, what's the version of that I can do? And I never really got social media. I always felt a bit like I'm supposed to go on here and act cool. And I was like, well, what? And I knew I needed to do something different on the internet. I was like, I'm not using the internet. I need to try. I'm sure, you know, or just, you know, what you're doing is like you're finding ways to connect to people and share information. So I need to be doing something different. And I was looking at building a gaming PC. So I was watching a bunch of PC videos, and a bunch of streaming videos started coming up. And then I was like, you know, started hearing more about it. And I'd had someone suggested me like 5 years ago, you should stream on Twitch. And I was like, what the hell are you even talking about? So long story short, I was just like, let me just try streaming from my studio on Twitch. And I'll just, you know, talk to people about making records. So I just started turning up 3 times a week, and I still turn up 3 times a week. And it's very much like in the multi-room studio equivalent. It's like we used to just pop in and out of each other's rooms. Yeah. Say, hey, what are you working on? You do a little bit of work, talk a bit of shit, you know, and so that's just basically like come and hang out in my studio, and we just hang out and talk about records. Sometimes I'll just be sitting there making a track. Other times, like our stream on Wednesday, it was like a full-on 2-hour consideration about career strategy. Friday just gone, Eventide actually sponsored a beat battle. So everyone had like 2 hours to download a folder of sounds, turn it into a track. Then we have like this massive listening party, and everyone can kind of like nominate their favorite songs in different categories, and we vote and give away a ton of plugins. I'll have artists on there, talk to them about their career. So it's really just a place to discuss what it's like creating music and building a music career, and everything that entails in the modern era, but just done in a super casual, kind of off the cuff kind of style.
That's awesome. Well, Rockstars, we'll include a link in the show notes too, so you can go check that out. Want to know how to record killer drums in your studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from Nashville session drummers in a Grammy-winning studio. Want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro mix that won't take years to learn, Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of a great mix, then register for my free course, Mixmaster Bundle, to get great mixes using simple, free plugins. Get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR to get 10% off any course in the Academy for a limited time. If you had to sum it up in a sentence, what's the difference between Twitch and YouTube, and why would you do a video on Twitch instead of YouTube?
Twitch is like hanging out, and that's actually what I love about it. And YouTube is a bit more like it's a bit more like a presentation,
right?
And so I've got a lot of plans to build out YouTube. It's mostly just been hours in the day. I actually just hired a couple of staff to help me with running all of this internet stuff. I also have built a platform called the Complete Producer Network, which is just a very positive, empowering, encouraging online platform to talk to people. And it's you have to request to join. I let everyone in, but I wanted it to just not be a place where anyone on the internet is walking in and talking crap.
Yeah, you don't want trolls. You want people who are really going to contribute.
There's a very specific culture. I'm also very, very, I'm thinking very hard about what we need to do in our industry to move towards even gender representation. I wanted to stream to really make this knowledge available to everyone, but I would like to specifically welcome women and non-binary people. I'm here to support and encourage and help you. So the Complete Producer Network is actually built on wanting to ensure this is an environment that women can come into and know it's a safe and welcoming and supportive environment.
Yeah.
So that's a really important thing, and it's kept me up at night. I've actually started doing things, when I talk to pro audio companies, if their website is all dudes, then I'm like, I noticed that there's no women on your website. What's happening here? And everyone is like, you know what? This is such a good point. We really need to do something about it. Everyone's really everyone is so positive about it, but I think we just need to say it out loud. And if you have any women who are listening, or especially younger women who are thinking about going into production and engineering, please, please, please do it. You can do it. The world needs your voice. I have never seen any indication that gender is any form of a differentiator in terms of ability in making music. I used to fly across the ocean to work with Emily Lazar, who is, in my opinion, the greatest mastering engineer in the world. Still work with her to this day. And it's worth saying that this week, Emily actually launched an initiative called We Are Moving the Needle. It's wearemovingtheneedle.org, and they're actually actively providing scholarships, equipment, and mentorship to women who are looking specifically to move into music production roles. And that's including fully paid scholarships to Blackbird.
Amazing.
Crazy amount of support, but we're really actively trying to do that. So point being, Complete Producer Network is very welcoming to everyone, but I really wanted to think about the gender imbalance in our community, in our profession. And we've just set it up, but there's actually a directory on there for any women engineers or producers, mixers who are available to work. Because I had a couple of male colleagues say, you know what, I wanted to hire a woman and I couldn't find one. And I went to these other websites and couldn't find any information. So again, come to completeproducer.net, hit request to join. We'll let you in and put your name on there if you're a woman wanting to make a career in music as well.
Very cool. Very cool.
And we got your back.
You're welcome to beat us up here at Recording Studio Rockstars for being too many dudes too. We would love to meet more. I would love to meet more women making records and bring them on the show.
It's really about the opportunity gap. And you mentioned my Twitter essays, and I kind of came up with this arbitrary mathematical concept called the opportunity multiplier, right? And if there's subconscious biases, any leap forward I've had in my career has come out of someone saying Damian hasn't done this yet, but I'm going to give him a shot. And every time someone says, this person hasn't done this yet, but I'm going to give him a shot, then it creates more and more and more opportunities. Yeah. So the reason as well that we're not seeing as many women on pro audio websites is we need to be working at a grassroots level to bring people through. But if you go out looking, there are so many brilliant women working in music, but we just need to be more active. And as men, we need to we need to be actively addressing this as well, and just going out and finding people. And, any platform that we have, especially those of us who are like more established, to just say like, this is someone who's great. Let me introduce you to this person at this company. All the relationships I have with pro audio manufacturers, for example, are because someone else introduced me.
Yeah,
So
100%.
all it takes is like an introduction, a recommendation, and the long-lasting impact. Remember, my pivotal thing is this one engineer I worked with in like 1996 recommended me to someone else. And that led to my Bjork gig, which basically gave me the credibility that I'm still cruising off the rest of my life. Because literally one person said, like, you should go work with Damian.
That's
so
really
don't
cool.
underestimate like the power of what a recommendation or endorsement can do.
So I've got one more question for you, Damian. This one is hypothetical. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. You get to go back in time, find young Damian, who's maybe you haven't been introduced to Bjork yet, and you're just tuning boy band vocals or something like that, or I don't know what stage you're at. But you say, listen, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
Can I answer that in two parts?
Absolutely.
The cop-out is, it all worked out. I don't have any advice.
Right.
But the other bit of advice is sleep.
Tell us about sleep.
Especially once the kids get involved. I think in the studio, it's traditional that we wear sleep deprivation and extended work hours as some kind of like macho badge of honor. And I was the most macho of all of them. Like, I still kind of brag about it. Like, I would be in the studio 6-7 days a week, 18 hours a day. And sometimes I wouldn't leave the studio for 3 or 4 days at a time. And I thought it was amazing, but it actually led to a bunch of burnouts. It led to actually deterioration in some relationships. But most critically, once I actually started constraining my hours and sleeping better, I found my work was way better. I was thinking far more clearly, and I didn't need to make 65,000 different moves on a track to make it good. I needed to make the right 300.
Yeah.
So when you sleep and you rest and you kind of change your approach to creativity, then you get, the music is better. I won't tell the full story, but there's a principle, I think it's called Parkinson's Law, which is that the task automatically expands to fill the amount of time available.
Yep.
So I had my studio in Montreal, and I'd work in there like 18 hours a day, get home at 4 a.m., sleep for 3 hours, and the kids would be up, and I'd be like, I'm a super chill guy, but there's a couple of years there where I was just like grumpy daddy. You know what I mean? I remember like trying to make a coffee in the morning, my daughter coming over and like grabbing my leg and going, Dad, and I was just like, stop it. And then like, when I looked at that, I was like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
But there's a guy who I would occasionally let use my studios in the weekend. He said, hey, look, I have a 2-week project. It's for an artist in London. I need to be in there every day at noon. And I thought, okay, cool. I'll get up at 6 a.m. and I'll go and mix. And I was shocked. Every single day I was mixing an album, and I'm not lying, every single day at like 11:53, I was printing a mix. Every single day. And normally I'd be bowling into the studio around 11:53, then being like, oh, I'm tired, I need to make a coffee, and then messing around for a couple of hours and starting to get some momentum. So when you can actually constrain your hours, sleep well, approach your time differently, it's great. As a younger person, I was getting hired onto people's sessions, so I wouldn't have necessarily had that control, but most of us now are actually able to make music independently. So just think about the fact that in 1 hour you can achieve far more than you can in 1 week. If you're well rested.
That's brilliant advice. And I agree 100%. When I changed my lifestyle to be, I'm only going to work Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. And that's when I'm going to make records. I started making better records.
Yeah. It's wild, isn't it? When you know you're going to leave, it's kind of like exciting because you're like, quick, like, what are we going to do now? Quick, quick, quick. Time's about to finish or something. And just like, I know probably 70% of you listening to this are going, that's cool, but I'm a night owl, and I was like 100% in the same camp. So my tip to you, you're going to resist this, but what I can tell you is if you wake up super early and go straight into the studio, you access the same brain as your 2-3 in the morning brain, except you have the clarity of thought and the energy and the objectivity to actually act on it in a meaningful manner. So like literally imagine waking up, rolling out of bed, starting to make music at like 5:15 a.m. until 7:15 a.m., even if you're working a day job. You'll be astonished at the results you can get. Don't look at your phone beforehand, because you just come straight out of the dream state. The whole world is quiet. You'll be hearing stuff in a whole different way. Your brain is refreshed. And then this is where it gets really good. The whole rest of the day, you feel amazing because you've achieved something.
Yeah.
And this is especially true for the people who are working day jobs. This is the kind of conversation I have a lot with people on Twitch. Like, Damian, I'm really trying to like move my music career forward, but I'm exhausted from my day job, and I come home and I'm trying to work and I'm not really like getting anywhere. I'm feeling really burnt out. It's like, just chill in the evening, just get up an hour earlier. And if you string together, like, imagine if you had like a 1 or 2 hour session every morning for like 3 months. Imagine like 90 sessions, 2 hour sessions in the morning where you're fresh, where you have energy, where you can make clear decisions, where you're excited. And the cool thing as well is you go to sleep thinking about like, oh, what am I going to do in the morning? This is going to be really interesting. And then you program your subconscious when you go to sleep. Can you surface all of the interesting processes for me? Can you show me like what we can do here? And then you wake up and you have these crazy ideas.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's wild. You really start to get into some kind of what is the nature of reality kind of thinking when you do that.
Well, and a good takeaway is just remembering rock stars do go to bed early, though. Make sure you get enough sleep.
Yeah.
Don't sleep less. Still sleep enough. Damian, thank you so much for hanging with us on Recording Studio Rockstars. Dude, this has been a freaking blast getting to meet you, man.
On all day. Yeah, we could do the Lord of the Rings interview on here, couldn't we? Like,
we'll have to have you back on. We'll continue on another one. We'll get a bunch of questions from the audience too. Let the rock stars know
where
we
need someone to interview you, by the way. Let me come on and interview you, because you seem like a very interesting dude.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
It's like you've given me a few glimpses into things here. I'm like, there's a lot more to this guy than I know so far.
I mean, you know, what can I say? I got some parallels. I've put in way too many hours in the studio and then tried to pivot back, and then, you know, had a lot of fun trying to hook things up and make them work.
Awesome.
But let the rock stars know where they can go find you online. Where would you like them to go learn more about you and your music?
Okay. The simplest thing you can do actually is if you go to Linktree/HereIsDamian. I'll have to send you the proper link. I'm Here Is Damian on all the platforms. And simplest thing is DamianTaylor.com. Very simple website, and it has links to everything else. But I'm on Twitch 3 times a week, like I said. Everyone's very welcome at the Complete Producer Network, CompleteProducer.net. But yeah, just go to my website and you'll have links to everything else. So that's Damian Taylor, DamianTaylor.com.
Dude, awesome hanging with you, man. Thank you so much for taking time out for us today.
It's a joy. Great to meet you.
We'll see you soon. Hopefully we'll meet you and see you around the studio.
That'd be amazing.
Awesome, dude. Cheers.
Go take care.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, Carl Tatz Design, Spectra 1964, Isotope, and JZ Microphones. Remember to use the coupon codes ROCK10 at isotope.com/rockstars for 10% off any plugin purchase, or use the coupon ROCKSTARS at jzmic.com for 20% off the pop filter for a limited time. And don't forget to learn how to get your your monitoring just right at carltatzdesign.com/mixroom-mentor. And finally, use the coupon code ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course at Recording Studio Rockstars Academy for a limited time. We'll include all these links in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.